The Deandre Ayton trade rumors are coming faster now. We are less than 2 weeks from the draft. It's time to rank the destinations for Deandre Ayton in a potential Suns sign and trade. Let's dive in. Locked on Suns.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 5 seasons and a writer at Suns.com and Dime Magazine. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today and every day. The draft is next week. Free agency just a bit away. The finals are wrapping up. It is the craziest time of the year in the NBA, so do not go anywhere. If you are finding us listening on a podcast platform, hit follow, hit subscribe. Do not miss a show. Make sure we end up in your feed every day. And if you're finding us on YouTube, that's the best way to support the show. Leave a subscription, hit subscribe down below, and leave a comment telling me what you think is the most likely Deandre Ayton destination. That is what we are here to talk about today. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at Locked On PHX Suns. You can follow me at Brendon Kleen 14. Just like to throw that in there every so often as well. I will tweet any news I see, any thoughts I have, all of it over on Twitter as well. But let's go here. I'm going to go 1 through 5. I'm not going to make you wait for my number 1 team, but I want to start and sort of level set a little bit again, because it's been a bit since I focused so much on the Deandre Ayton stuff. There's been the COVID news and everything else. And then there was just the more likely than not to leave report last week from John Hollinger, but I haven't talked about destinations so much. So a couple of things here. One is Jake Fisher, who's just become really, really good at this and has been giving us a lot of news when at a time of year when I feel like a lot of other news breakers are hesitant to say some of the chatter, even though it's important. Jake has been doing that. And so he went on a podcast this weekend at The Athletic, their weekend NBA show, and he had a couple of interesting things. One of them was reiterating that John Hollinger report from last week, basically saying that he was operating under the same assumption as Hollinger that Ayton was more likely than not to end up on a different team. And that obviously, this goes without saying to me, but just to continue to reiterate it again, the Suns are not going to let Ayton walk for nothing. Nobody seems to think that that's on the table, which would be incredibly stupid. So I'm glad that is still the case. Jake Fisher also last week reported that the Jazz, quote, the Jazz front office has engaged various teams in Rudy Gobert discussions. So that's where I want to start, actually, before I tell you my number 1 team when it comes to DeAndre Ayton destinations, is I want to start with Gobert and Utah and everything else going on there. So the reason I do that is I think he might be the first domino to fall, and let me tell you why. So obviously, Gobert is already 30. He is on a big, long contract. He's going to make $170 million through 2026, which would be his age 34 season, which is crazy. It's a lot of money to pay a 7-foot-plus player that deep into his 30s, whereas Ayton is only 24 and is only going to be making, even if he does get that max from another team in a sign and trade, he's only going to be making about $131 million through 2026. So it might seem like, okay, well, Ayton should be the priority, right? Cheaper, younger, going to continue to get better, less of a health risk, etc. However, a couple things make me feel like, again, Gobert will be that first domino. One is he can just be traded flat out rather than worrying about a sign and trade. I kind of think we'll start to hear stuff leading up into the draft. It might be something where Utah wants some of whatever might happen on draft night. Maybe they want a first-round pick this year as part of the package. It's going to be a big package. Don't get that twisted. But maybe that is when this gets done. It can happen anytime because he's already under that contract. He's not headed into free agency. There's no option to worry about like there is with a James Harden or a Kyrie Irving. Gobert is a player who is a star level guy who is known to be available and can be traded now. That's why I think that him playing the same position as Ayton, and maybe to some teams who want to win now, being a little bit more desirable than Ayton, means that he'll get there first. On the contract and age stuff, I think Gobert is just the sure thing right now. He's also not super reliant on his athleticism specifically. Like, he's not a player who he's so big and tall and long that he doesn't really jump and run all that. Like, he's not, I guess, like Ben Wallace or something or Dwight Howard, right? Where so much of that is their athleticism being part of what makes them great as defensive players. He's not really like that. He also doesn't do a lot on offense, so you don't have to worry about that part falling off. He's also never had a major injury, so I guess it's a bet on will that continue. He's really big, so I guess you probably shouldn't bet on it. But I guess what I'm saying is he is a guy who I think you can expect to continue to be an elite defensive player of the year caliber guy, somebody who single-handedly puts you in contention to be a top 10 defense for at least the next couple of seasons. That seems reasonable. Yes, the big contracts might scare you away, but if you're a team that wants to win right now, if you're Dallas, if you're Brooklyn, if you're Atlanta, maybe you could see those teams prioritizing Gobert if they really do want to make a move for a center over Ayton. And I would even say some of the, maybe quote unquote, like bad, worse teams might feel the same way. I think he will be the first domino. I think that domino could happen as soon as the draft. So it may not actually delay anything with regard to Ayton, but as we're talking about these teams, it's just important to remember this list could change depending on what happens with Gobert. Ayton might have to take his second priority option. He might have to go to the team he wants to be at second most if Gobert goes to the top team. So just keep that in mind. Back to Jake Fisher as we get to my number one team here. Drum roll, all that good stuff. Let's hit it. Jake reported, like I know the guy, Jake Fisher reported on an Athletic podcast this weekend that he's heard the Hawks may be the team most hotly in pursuit of Ayton after all. He also said that if you've been reading any of the stuff about the Hawks, they are expected to be pretty aggressive. Their owner loves to do this every so often where he just comes out and just lets it be known, hey, we're going to make a bunch of moves. We're going to change the roster. And so he kind of did that. And it also sounds like John Collins will finally be on the move. They did end up re-signing him in restricted free agency last offseason. Then he was hurt a lot, so they weren't able to really talk to anybody about trades for him. I don't think he makes a ton of sense for the Suns in a trade, but I still have the Hawks at number one, as I'm sure you were predicting based on me talking about Atlanta. Here's why. Collins aside, between Bogdan, the smaller one that the Suns were supposed to have, Clint Capella, Kevin Huerter, and Danilo Gallinari. That's four players that are basically in roughly the salary range that would make it possible to facilitate a Deandre Ayton trade. Collins is a little bit on the high end. He makes more than all those guys. Plus, again, I don't think he's a really great fit at the four for the Suns. I don't think he's really somebody you want as a full-time center. So I don't think there is a match. I don't think there's a match there. But this would most likely take a third team anyway. So I guess just include Collins, whatever. The point is, there are 4 or 5 players on the Hawks that make roughly the amount that would need to be there for a sign and trade to happen. Huerter makes the least. Gallinari and Collins make the most, but that's a lot of options. And I don't feel like Atlanta is married to any of those players. I feel like most likely to me is Trae Young and DeAndre Hunter are probably the only untouchable, and even Hunter probably not. They seem to be ready to do anything here. So one of those players, whether it's Bogdanovich, Capella, Huerter, Gallinari, less so Gallinari, I don't love him. I don't really know if he's a playoff player, especially with him getting older and losing what little athleticism he did have. But one of those guys, plus they have Jalen Johnson, who they drafted last year. I believe he was a Duke big man. Didn't really play a ton, but seems to be pretty promising as a center prospect. Fairly traditional, just rim running center, but has potential there. Or a future first of theirs. Makes a lot of sense. So one of those guys who makes the right amount of money, plus Jalen Johnson, their first round pick last year. Maybe if you're getting one of the better players, you get the worst, which would be Johnson. And if you're getting one of their worst players, you get the future first, which is a little bit more appealing. Ayton, here's the other thing to consider, though. I have them number one because of how much a lot of those players would fit here in Phoenix, the fact that their salaries work, and the fact that Atlanta wants to make moves. But the one downside, or the reason maybe to pick nits with it, is Ayton would be filling a pretty similar role to the one that he does here in Phoenix. He would be a clear number two, whereas right now he's sort of a number three, number four, depending on the night. He'd get to fill up the box score the same way as Collins and Capella have, playing with Trey, but he's not going to get a lot of offensive creation opportunities. And if that's what he has always wanted as a player, which there's a lot of evidence that that's what he wants, I don't think that they're going to turn around their offense to just have Trae Young throw an entry pass to Deandre Ayton in the post a few times a game to make him happy. I think he would be playing a pick and roll, big man role with Trae. He would win, he could produce, but it's a matter of, is that something he wants? So that's going to be the one thing that is interesting to consider about Atlanta. Maybe that means Gobert makes more sense for them, but I still think it's a nice match for the Suns to get something good out of it and have Ayton find a landing place that he likes. Let's move on to teams number 2 and 3 on my list. First, though, guys, today's show brought to you by TrueBill. We all hate to sign up for something, whether it's a subscription or a membership or whatever, and then forget about it or never be reminded about it. Maybe you think it's a trial and then it turns into a monthly payment. You never know these days with how many things are getting thrown at you. And TrueBill is the new app that helps you identify and stop paying for subscriptions you don't need, want, or simply forgot about. On average, people who use TrueBill save up to $720 per year. Companies love to make those subscriptions hard to cancel. Sometimes you have to make a call. Sometimes you have to click into 6 different layers of a website. They don't make it easy, but TrueBill takes it into their hands, makes it incredibly simple for you. Just link those accounts and TrueBill will cancel them in just one tap. And your TrueBill concierge is there when you need them to cancel unwanted subscriptions so you don't have to. They'll give you that reminder. Hey, this just came through. Do you even want this anymore? Let's go ahead and cancel it. They give you that reminder to make sure you're on top of it. TrueBill has over 2 million users and they have saved over $100 million combined. So don't fall for subscription scams. Start canceling today at TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. Go right now. TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. It could save you thousands per year. That's TrueBill.com/LockedOnNBA. All right, number 2 on my list of power ranked Deandre Ayton landing spots here. And again, this is from both the Ayton side and the Suns side and the potential trade partners side. It's all about which teams are most likely to satisfy all 3 of those things. And that's where I'm coming at this from. We finally have a little bit more information here. The news is actually starting to get a little bit more tangible, and I've just thought about it more. So number 2, the Detroit Pistons. And it might not be for the reason that you think. Okay, so as Aaron and I discussed last week on the show, Aaron Edwards on Friday's show, Deandre Ayton would come into Detroit. This is from the Ayton side. And he'd be able to immediately be a focal point on offense. He'd get to play with a good player, a good building block guard in Cade Cunningham, but not somebody who you think necessarily is going to dominate the ball. That's what makes Cade special. He is big. He can create advantages in the half court. He can shoot the heck out of the ball. He's smart. He has, a sharing, he is a point guard at heart, but he doesn't dominate the ball. His usage rate, everything else was very low, even as they started to win games last season at the end of the year. The Pistons obviously have cap space is one part of this to consider, though. So from the Pistons standpoint, they can make a couple of moves. They have a big cap hold for Marvin Bagley, who's a restricted free agent. Obviously, the same draft class as DeAndre Ayton, so no surprise there. I'm not convinced they're going to want to give him a big salary, but even if they did just get that done really quickly, bring him back on a 1-year deal, 2-year deal, whatever it is, they could do that for a few $1 million and then basically get rid of everybody else that's a free agent, and they'd have $31, $32 million to give Ayton that offer. So they can do that. Maybe that means they don't even bother with the sign and trade. But one thing is, if there's other suitors, which we believe there are, then the Pistons being able to say, hey, we'll facilitate a deal here, and that'll make it more likely that we kind of win these sweepstakes. That's a part of why teams might want to engage in a trade. Also, you got to think the Pistons aren't expecting to become a championship team anytime soon. They're also already paying a couple of guys, Jeremy Grant right now, Kelly Olynyk, and bringing in a max player, knowing they're going to eventually have to sign Cade Cunningham to a big contract, et cetera. Like, they don't have a need to spend that money. That's still money for them, right? So if they could clear out some of the other contracts, it might make a little bit of sense. Olynyk especially, Jeremy Grant especially. The reason, actually, I think people need to be taking the Olynyk part of this a lot more seriously than they are. That is a name that I hadn't brought up myself, but doing the prep for this show, I was like, that seems like a perfect fit for the Suns. If they're not convinced Dario Saric is going to be able to play at a high level at the beginning of next season, Frank Kaminsky's gone. Olynyk makes a lot of sense to bring in as a part of the center mix once Ayton is gone, if he does leave. The reason I don't have them at the top here, I have them at number 2, is I'm not convinced that Grant is a great fit with the Suns on either end. I've said this a couple times now. He's never been a great high-volume three-point shooter. There's been seasons when he's had high volume, and there's been seasons when he's had high efficiency, but never really both. The 2 best shooting seasons of his career, he was only taking about 3 a game, and he was playing off of incredibly high-level offensive players. Not that he wouldn't be in Phoenix. He would be, so you would expect the efficiency to be there, but this is not Joe Harris or somebody, right? This is a get in the corner. You can make those if they're open, but other than that, maybe not. And I think he's probably closer to Cam Johnson than Jay Crowder as a defender. So he's not somebody that I really see as a massive upgrade. And I also think the Ayton part of this, I'm not positive that he would love the idea of Detroit, just to throw that in there as well. Team number 3, the San Antonio Spurs. The main reason I like this one still, and 3 might seem high, especially because it is another Western Conference team. We know teams don't love to do that if it's somebody they're going to have to face a lot. But the reason I love this one is, or like it, number 3, Jakob Poeltl, Doug McDermott, Josh Richardson, 3 obvious contract matches here. They're all on the lower end. The Spurs they have DeJounte Murray. He's not going anywhere, guys. He was an all-star this year. They're not trading him for Deandre Ayton. So I don't think that's reasonable to expect. But so Poeltl, McDermott, Richardson, those are smaller salaries. They're all between like 9 and 12 million. So you'd have to kind of stack a couple of them on together. They also have Zach Collins, who's at about $7 million. They have the flexibility to make the salary stuff work. Maybe it takes a third team, whatever, but they have that. They also have young players from the Suns side that might be desirable. Keldon Johnson, who we all have heard of. Devin Vassell, who I was yelling that the Suns should take with the Jalen Smith pick. He's a really good young wing. Josh Primo, who they just drafted. I'm not sure if the Suns would want him. He was a very surprising pick, and he's very young, very raw. And then Romeo Langford, who just came over in the Derek White deal from Boston. I still believe he could be something. He's getting a little bit older. Maybe he's not going to pan out, but that's at least a young prospect that the Suns could get back here. Not a lot of these teams that the Suns might be dealing with have young players who could actually be available. Most of the other teams, like, I talked about DeAndre Hunter in Atlanta. He's not going anywhere. I talked about, Detroit. They don't really have a lot of that yet, unless it's like Isaiah Stewart or something. So from the Spurs perspective, I think that they are finally starting to sound like a team that might be willing to get aggressive in the offseason. That's not been something that they've really done a ton. They traded Kawhi Leonard because they had to. They brought in LaMarcus Aldridge, but they notoriously hadn't made a trade in years before the Derek White deal. So you see that they made the White deal. They actually quietly have a new GM that doesn't get talked about a lot. It seems like this might be Greg Popovich's final season coaching. So there's change happening there, and they're understanding that they need to get the team that they want rather than sort of letting things happen to them, which has been their MO for a long time when they had great players. Now, they have Murray. They don't have a lot else. They need to get something figured out. From the Ayton perspective here, it's obviously a strong foundation. It's a respected franchise. I believe he could go there, continue to win at a decent clip and develop, but does he want to go to another, the small market thing, obviously, but I also think it's an open question if Ayton wants to go to another strict organization. You know what I mean? This is a place where he's going to be expected to execute his role, or he will be, punished for it. He might lose playing time. He might lose opportunities. And Greg Popovich is a no-nonsense coach, very much like Monty. I don't know if that will appeal to Ayton. I'm not saying, obviously, he has thrived in Phoenix and what he's asked to do. I'm not trying to paint Ayton as somebody who's trying to run away from accountability or anything like that. But if he's changing teams, to me, that says whatever it is about Phoenix, I want to get away from that. So going to a place in San Antonio that has a lot of similarities, I don't know if that would be the most appealing thing to him. So I have the number 3. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility, but it's a little bit less likely to me right now than the Pistons or the Hawks. Let's move on to number 4, though, and number 5 to close things out. I also have a couple of honorable mentions. First, today's show brought to you by BetOnline. We have Game 7 of the NBA Final. Game 5 of the NBA Finals tonight, and BetOnline continues to be your number 1 source for betting stats and info on all of it, including the basketball championships. But in addition, the NHL Finals, Major League Baseball regular season, fights, golf, tennis, every single weekend. BetOnline, your continued source for all sports wagering info. They have live betting, they have analysis articles, they have podcasts, they have news. It's really about keeping you updated and informed so that you're making bets the smart way. Let's see. Basketball here. We have WNBA. The Mercury are playing on Sunday when I'm recording this. They are 7.5-point dogs on the road in Washington. I don't love that. They usually have WNBA championship odds. Oh, here we go. Basketball futures, WNBA championship. The Mercury are currently in 6th place, right smack dab in the middle of the league. That's pretty high for what I would expect, so maybe don't cash in on them yet. But the Aces are just, it's too early to crown them the favorite the way that we have. So you have the reigning champion, Chicago Sky, plus 500. You have the Mystics, who have a ton of talent, plus 850. Just got to keep track. Just got to be checking BetOnline constantly. So head to the website today or use a mobile device to learn more about the latest trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, numbers 4 and 5 to close things out here on my Deandre Ayton Destination Power Rankings. Let's go to number 4, which is the Indiana Pacers. So it might surprise you to have them at number 4. I think a lot of people see them as one of the very top teams in the mix here. But we had Mark Stein on his newsletter reporting last week that the Pacers aren't expected to move Turner. He hasn't heard anywhere that there's noise around a Turner trade, and that they want to regroup and actually try to win again this year. So it's not to say that getting Ayton would inhibit them from winning. I think he would help them win. But if you're giving up a couple of pieces, your team might get a little bit thinner, etc. They seem to want to add to what they have, not shuffle the deck chairs a little bit, you know? I also think the number 6 pick thing, which has been at the center point of a lot of the rumors and even the John Gambadoro report a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't pass the smell test to me. It would require, as I've talked about in a couple of recent shows, a lot of tampering and pretty sophisticated tampering. I mean, Deandre Ayton can't be traded until free agency starts, but the draft is a week before that. So you'd have to have the Pacers pick a player that you like and then trade that player a week later, and that would definitely raise some alarm among the league. And you're talking about fines or the trade getting called off. It's happened the past couple seasons, and it gets investigated. It's not really allowed. I do think Malcolm Brogdon would be a pretty logical trade target. I think he could be. It would be a little bit weird to imagine him coming off the bench, so I don't know about that whole thing, but he's a good fit here from a style standpoint and age standpoint, whatever. But he is about to turn 30 already because he was such an old rookie, and he's struggled with injuries his entire career. That's part of the reason the Bucks got rid of him when he was part of their, seemingly part of their championship core. So that seems like a pretty big risk. Another reason I have them down there. If it's not going to be Turner, and it's not going to be Brogdon, and the pick isn't really going to be in play, you start to run out of options pretty quickly. Mostly, to me, I just don't think that player is there to be the centerpiece of a trade. Indiana doesn't have a lot of incentive to flip their more affordable center for one who's on a max, when the talent gap isn't that big between the two of them. Turner only makes about $17 million a year, and he's been really productive for them. They finally got rid of Sabonis. They probably see Turner as ready to exceed the value of his contract, be a really important piece for them, and Ayton would come in, be a new thing they would have to figure out, and make a ton more money. So I just, the more I try to look at the Pacers thing from different angles, and as more reporting comes out, I really don't see it. Maybe 4 is even too high for them. Number 5, rounding out the group, is the Raptors. To me, this one is a result. I included them at the last team here because the OG Anunoby thing just isn't going away. There were rumors a while ago, reports from Jake Fisher, that he would be available. I was kind of skeptical. I did a crossover show with the host of Locked On Raptors on our network that week, and he was really skeptical that they would do that, but it's not going away. And Jake had a little bit more reporting lately indicating that the Raptors have these 6 guys who are untouchable, and right now it doesn't seem like Anunoby's on that list. And I just think if it really was a possibility, he would be probably the best single player in terms of fit with the Suns and upside to keep getting better and fit in the modern NBA, fit in a playoff series. He's probably the best, the most desirable guy, in my opinion, that the Suns could get. More than Miles Turner, more than Kevin Huerter or Clint Capella from Atlanta, more than Devin Vassell from San Antonio, more than anybody, more than Jeremy Grant to me. So that has to, it just, if that's a realistic trade option, then it has to be up there for the Suns. I also think Gary Trent Jr. is not somebody we should discount as a possibility. He just signed a new long-term contract. He's a great scoring wing. He can shoot really well. I don't think he's like the best player, available to the Suns, but he's young. He does what they need him to do. And if he was playing backup to Booker and Paul next season, you could do a lot worse as that third option, that sort of Eric Gordon type of guy that we've all talked about for so long. But here's the big but. I'm not convinced the Raptors actually want to go out and pay big money for a center. The only play, so just think about this. First of all, they already have centers. So as that whole thing plays out, as we hear more about Toronto wanting a center, they have Ken Burch under contract for next year, and they have Precious Achiuwa, who just got drafted 2 seasons ago and has a lot of upside. Both of those guys, Ken Burch is not the most athletic player in the world. Precious Achiuwa is a little bit undersized, so I get why they might want to upgrade, but they have options, and they already were, a couple wins away from the second round. They were already a pretty high seed. They're a good team already, so why disrupt all of that? The other part is they've only maxed 3 players under Masai Ujiri, as far as I could find. I don't think I'm missing anybody. Kyle Lowry, DeMar DeRozan, and Pascal Siakam. I'm actually not even sure Lowry ever got a real max, but they've only ever paid big money to those 3 players. Those were all basically homegrown players, and they all were inside, like they were, homegrown. They were already there, and they had already proved a lot, and they had already shown themselves to be a big fit with everybody else on the team. They don't go out and do big deals like this. Not to say they won't. Masai went out and got Kawhi Leonard. It wasn't free agency or something, but obviously that was a big disruption. So I'm not saying they will never do that. But they don't do it often. And so this might be one where the Suns might say, hey, on our whiteboard, as we're ranking out the possibilities, Toronto probably has a lot that the Suns would want. They might be one of the teams the Suns would most prefer to deal with, but I don't know if from the Toronto perspective it's quite there. I think from the Ayton perspective, it probably is. If they really did want a center and they went out and got him, that would be a pretty big commitment to him, a pretty big show of support for his ability, and he's young enough to grow with this core of guys. I think he fits nicely with Siakam. I've thought Siakam was an awesome fit for the Suns for a long time for that same reason. He has a guard in Fred VanVleet, Scotty Barnes. They would play defense in a really cool way that would take advantage of what Ayton can do, and he probably would be a nice scoring option for them because that's one of the things that they need more than anything. I just don't know if the Raptors would want to do it. All right, there you have it. As things currently stand, June 12th, 11 a.m., as I'm recording this, those 1 to 5 are my top Ayton destinations from all 3 sides, the Suns, that team, and Ayton himself. The honorable mentions, just to throw them out there, and the reason I didn't include them is because we just haven't heard concrete connections between them and the Suns or them and really wanting Ayton that much. And I just didn't see trades that made a ton of sense. So one is the Charlotte Hornets. They just hired a new coach. I'm not sure if maybe things start to heat up in terms of rumors around them now that part of their offseason has been checked off. I just don't love the Terry Rozier fit, to be honest with you. And I don't love Gordon Hayward because he's just been hurt for years, and I'm not sure he'll ever be the same player that he was. I like PJ Washington. I don't think he's somebody you want as a full-time center. So from any angle, I just couldn't see it. And I also think at the end of the day, he's going to play a similar role if he's going there. He's going to be LaMelo Ball's pick and roll partner. And if you add all that up, it's just hard to find an awesome match. The Trailblazers, there has been a little bit more smoke around them. They're the last honorable mention here. They don't have a lot of tools to make that trade unless they want to trade Josh Hart, who they just got, or Eric Bledsoe, who the Suns probably wouldn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole just because of the animosity in the past and the fact that he's not going to contribute in a role here. They would probably just try to trade him off again or cut him because he's only partially guaranteed. So there's not an awesome trade there. I do think Ayton could potentially play a pretty sizable role the same way that they've kind of used Yusuf Nurkic, and he would be a big impact defender there. Damian Lillard would be an awesome player to play with. I think that team could get back to winning in a hurry if they get healthy, but I don't see the trade. I just don't see what the Suns would want. I don't really see what Portland could give, and that's where I come down on it not making a whole ton of sense. All right, that'll close us out. Back tomorrow. I'm sure there will be news, guys. I can't imagine that we'll get a safe, quiet day in Suns land anytime soon. So hit subscribe, hit follow. A big thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Monday. Now go make Locked On NBA your second listen to catch up on the NBA Finals.